When my daughter Sarah called me just a burden during our Father's Day dinner, I quietly smiled and excused myself from the table. By the next morning, I had contacted my real estate agent to list the $2.3 million house she was living in for sale. And that was just the beginning. Justice had to happen. You won't believe what I did next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening in the comments. My name is Marcus Thompson, and I'm 62 years old. I work as a commercial real estate developer here in California. I've been in the real estate business for 35 years now. Over the decades, I built a successful property investment company. My wife died from a heart attack 8 years ago. We had one daughter together named Sarah, who is now 34 years old. Sarah got married 5 years ago to a man named Kevin. They live in a beautiful house in one of the nicest neighborhoods in town. The house is worth $2.3 million in today's market. It has 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, and sits on 2 acres of land. Sarah and Kevin have 2 young children, who are my grandchildren. A 7-year-old grandson and a 5-year-old granddaughter. I love those kids more than anything else in this world. For most of Sarah's adult life, our relationship was close and loving. I helped her through college and supported her career dreams. When Sarah got married, I was happy to welcome Kevin into our family. I thought I would be an involved grandfather and supportive father-in-law. But something started changing about 3 years ago after my wife died. Sarah began treating me differently during our family visits. She seemed annoyed when I came over to spend time with the grandchildren. "Dad, we're busy with our own family time right now," she would say. "Maybe you should call first before just showing up at our house." I felt like I was becoming unwelcome in their home. But I kept visiting because I wanted to be part of my grandchildren's lives. Sarah also started making comments about my age and health. "Dad, you're getting older and shouldn't be driving so much anymore. Maybe it's time for you to think about moving into assisted living. Kevin and I worry about you being alone in that big house." These comments hurt my feelings because I was healthy and independent. I didn't need anyone's help with daily activities or managing my life. But Sarah seemed to think I was becoming a burden to the family. Last month, things got much worse between Sarah and me. She started avoiding my phone calls and making excuses about family visits. "Dad, the kids have soccer practice and birthday parties every weekend. We're really busy with work and don't have time for family dinners. Maybe we can see you next month when our schedule calms down." I felt like Sarah was pushing me out of their lives completely. But I kept trying to maintain our relationship because family was important to me. 2 weeks ago, Sarah called and invited me over for Father's Day dinner. I was excited because we hadn't spent time together in over a month. I thought this was Sarah's way of reconnecting with me after our distance. I bought gifts for the grandchildren and looked forward to the celebration. When Father's Day arrived, I dressed nicely and drove to their house. Sarah and Kevin seemed friendly when I arrived at their front door. The grandchildren were excited to see me and show me their toys. We had a nice dinner together, and I felt hopeful about our relationship. But then something happened that changed everything between us. After dinner, we were sitting in their living room talking about family. Kevin started complaining about his job stress and financial pressures. "It's expensive raising kids and maintaining this house," he said. "Sometimes I wonder how we're going to afford everything long-term." Sarah joined in the conversation about their money concerns. "Dad, we've been thinking about our family's financial future," she said. "Kevin and I are worried about taking care of ourselves and the kids." I offered to help them with any financial problems they were having. "Sarah, you know I've done well in real estate over the years. If you need help with anything, I'm happy to support my family." But then Sarah said something that shocked me completely. "Dad, that's exactly the problem we need to discuss with you. Kevin and I have been talking about your situation as you get older. We're concerned about you becoming a financial burden on our family." I felt confused by her statement about me being a burden. "Sarah, what do you mean? I'm financially independent and successful. I don't need any help from you or Kevin with my expenses." Sarah looked at Kevin before continuing with her hurtful words. "Dad, you're 62 years old and living alone in that big house. What happens when you get sick or can't take care of yourself? Kevin and I can't afford to support you and raise our own children." I was starting to feel hurt and angry about this conversation. "Sarah, I have my own money and insurance for any future needs. You don't need to worry about supporting me financially." But then Sarah said the words that ended our relationship as I knew it. "Dad, I'm sorry, but you're just a burden that we can't handle. Kevin and I have our own family to worry about now. We can't be responsible for taking care of you too." The room went completely quiet after Sarah called me a burden. Kevin looked uncomfortable, and the children were confused by the tension. I sat there feeling completely betrayed by my own daughter. After 34 years of loving and supporting her, after helping her through college and into her successful career, after welcoming her husband and being a devoted grandfather, Sarah thought I was just a burden she didn't want to deal with. That night, I made a decision that would teach Sarah the most expensive lesson of her life. Now let me tell you exactly how I built my real estate empire while raising Sarah as a single father after her mother died. This story starts 35 years ago when I was just 27 years old and working as a junior real estate agent. I had big dreams about building wealth through property investments, but I started with almost nothing in my bank account. My first real estate deal was buying a small duplex for $45,000 with every penny I could scrape together for the down payment. I lived in one side of that duplex and rented out the other side to cover most of my mortgage payment. The rental income taught me the power of real estate as an investment that pays for itself over time. Within 2 years, I had saved enough money from the rental income to buy a second small property, then a third property the following year. By the time Sarah was 10 years old, I owned 6 rental properties that were generating steady monthly income. But the real breakthrough came when I started focusing on commercial real estate development instead of just residential rentals. I partnered with some investors to buy an old warehouse and convert it into office spaces for small businesses. That project made me $200,000 in profit when we sold it 2 years later. Suddenly, I had enough money to start thinking bigger about real estate opportunities in our growing city. Over the next 15 years, I bought and developed dozens of commercial properties throughout California. Shopping centers, office buildings, apartment complexes, and even some industrial properties that I leased to manufacturing companies. Each successful project gave me more capital to invest in larger and more profitable developments. By the time Sarah graduated from college, my real estate portfolio was worth over $8 million. The biggest success came when I bought 50 acres of undeveloped land on the outskirts of town for $300,000. Everyone thought I was crazy to buy land so far from the city center. But I could see that our town was growing in that direction, and eventually that land would become valuable. I held on to that property for 12 years while the city expanded around it. When a major shopping mall developer wanted to buy my land, I sold it for $4.2 million. That single land deal allowed me to expand into luxury residential development, which became my specialty for the next decade. I would buy large lots in desirable neighborhoods, tear down old houses, and build custom luxury homes that sold for millions of dollars. Each house took about 18 months to complete and generated profits of $300,000 to $500,000. I was completing 4 to 6 luxury home projects every year. By the time Sarah got married 5 years ago, my total net worth had reached $15.8 million. I owned commercial properties, luxury homes, undeveloped land, and a successful construction company that built my custom houses. The monthly income from my rental properties alone was over $40,000. I was essentially financially independent and could have retired comfortably at 57 years old. But here's the secret that Sarah never knew about my wealth and success over all these years. I deliberately lived modestly and didn't show off my money or expensive lifestyle. I drove nice but not flashy cars, lived in a comfortable but not extravagant house, and dressed like a regular middle-class businessman. I wanted Sarah to grow up with normal values and work ethic instead of feeling entitled because her father was wealthy. I also never told Sarah the details about my real estate investments or how much money I was actually making. When she asked about my work, I would just say I was in real estate and construction. Sarah knew I was successful, but she had no idea about the true scope of my wealth or property holdings. I wanted her to achieve her own success instead of depending on her father's money for her lifestyle and security. The most important secret that Sarah still doesn't know is that I own the house she and Kevin live in. 3 years ago, when they were looking to buy their dream home, they found the perfect property but couldn't afford the $2.3 million asking price. Their mortgage application was rejected because their combined income wasn't high enough to qualify for such an expensive house loan. That's when I secretly stepped in to make their dream possible without them knowing it. I bought the house directly from the seller using one of my real estate investment companies. Then I set up a special arrangement where Sarah and Kevin could live in the house while making what they thought were mortgage payments. Really, they were just paying me rent that covered the property taxes and maintenance costs. Their monthly payments of $4,000 were much less than a real mortgage would cost. Sarah and Kevin believe they own their beautiful home and are building equity through their monthly payments. They have no idea that their house is actually owned by a limited liability company that I control completely. All the property records show my investment company as the legal owner, not Sarah and Kevin as the homeowners they think they are. I've been subsidizing their comfortable lifestyle for 3 years while they took all the credit for their success. I also helped them in other ways over the past few years, without them knowing the source of their good fortune. When Kevin got his promotion at work, I had quietly invested in his company and recommended him for advancement to the management team. When Sarah's small business started growing rapidly, I was secretly one of her biggest clients through my various real estate companies. Much of their professional success was actually my behind-the-scenes support disguised as their own achievements. Over the past 30 years, I estimate that I've spent about $200,000 supporting Sarah's education, career, and lifestyle. College tuition, wedding expenses, help with their first apartment, and various financial emergencies that I handled quietly. Plus, the ongoing subsidy of their housing costs through the arrangement with their dream house. Sarah thought she was independent and successful, but really she had been living off her father's wealth and connections. All of this financial history made Sarah's Father's Day insult even more painful and ironic. The daughter who called me a burden had been living in a house I owned, working for companies I invested in, and enjoying a lifestyle I made possible. Tomorrow she was going to learn exactly who the real burden was in our relationship and who controlled her comfortable life. Let me take you back to that terrible Father's Day conversation when Sarah called me a burden. It was Sunday evening around 7 o'clock, and we were sitting in their living room after dinner. The grandchildren were playing with their toys while the adults talked about family and life. Everything seemed normal and pleasant until Kevin started complaining about their financial pressures and future concerns. I should have seen the warning signs when Sarah joined in with her worried comments about money and planning for the future. "Dad, Kevin and I have been having serious discussions about our family's long-term financial security," Sarah said in a tone that made me nervous. She was speaking more formally than usual, like she had rehearsed this conversation beforehand. "We're concerned about what happens as everyone in our family gets older and needs more support." I thought she was talking about planning for their children's future, or maybe saving for retirement expenses. "Sarah, that's smart thinking," I replied, trying to be supportive of their financial planning. "It's important to prepare for the future and make sure everyone is taken care of." I was actually proud that my daughter was being responsible about family financial security. "If you need any advice about investments or planning, I'm happy to share what I've learned over the years." I thought this was going to be a nice conversation about me helping them make smart decisions. But then Sarah's expression became more serious, and she looked at Kevin before continuing. "Dad, that's actually what we need to discuss with you tonight," she said carefully. "Kevin and I have been thinking about your situation and how it affects our family's future." I started to feel confused about where this conversation was heading. "We're worried about some potential problems that we need to address now before they become bigger issues." "What kind of problems are you worried about?" I asked, genuinely confused about what Sarah meant. I couldn't think of any problems I was causing for their family or their financial security. "Sarah, if there's something specific bothering you, just tell me directly so we can figure it out together." I was still thinking this was some kind of misunderstanding that we could resolve with honest communication. Kevin jumped into the conversation at this point, with his own concerns about my role in their family. "Marcus, we're worried about what happens when you can't live independently anymore," he said bluntly. "You're 62 years old and living alone in that big house without any family nearby." I was shocked that Kevin was speaking to me like I was some kind of invalid who couldn't take care of myself properly. "Kevin, I'm perfectly healthy and capable of managing my own life," I replied calmly but firmly. "I don't need anyone to take care of me or worry about my independence." I was starting to feel insulted by their assumption that I was somehow helpless or incapable. "I have my own money, my own insurance, and my own plans for the future." Kevin and Sarah exchanged glances like they didn't believe what I was telling them about my situation. Sarah took over the conversation again with even more hurtful assumptions about my future needs. "Dad, we know you think you're fine now, but things change quickly when people get older," she said condescendingly. "What happens when you get sick or have an accident and can't work anymore?" She was talking to me like I was a child who didn't understand the realities of aging and health problems. "Sarah, I have excellent health insurance and long-term care policies that will cover any future medical needs," I explained patiently. "Plus, I have savings and investments that can support me for the rest of my life." I was trying to reassure them that I wasn't going to be a financial burden on anyone. "You don't need to worry about supporting me or taking care of my expenses." But Sarah and Kevin still looked skeptical about my claims of financial independence. That's when Sarah said something that made me realize what this conversation was really about. "Dad, Kevin and I can barely afford our own house payments and the kids' expenses," she said with frustration in her voice. We can't take on the additional cost of supporting you when you can't work anymore." I suddenly understood that they weren't worried about me. They were worried about themselves and their money. "Sarah, I never asked you to support me financially," I said, starting to feel hurt by her selfish attitude. "I've been taking care of myself for 62 years, and I plan to continue doing that for many more years." I couldn't believe my own daughter was more concerned about money than about having a relationship with her father. "I don't understand why you think I would become your financial responsibility." Kevin tried to justify their position by talking about the costs of elderly care and family obligations. "Marcus, nursing homes cost thousands of dollars per month," he said, like he was educating me about something I didn't know. "Even with insurance, there are always additional expenses that families have to cover." He was basically telling me that they had already decided they wouldn't help me if I ever needed assistance. But then Sarah said the words that ended our relationship as I knew it. "Dad, I'm sorry, but you're just a burden that we can't handle," she said directly to my face. "Kevin and I have our own family to worry about now, and we can't be responsible for taking care of you too." The room became completely quiet as her cruel words hung in the air between us. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach as I processed what my daughter had just said. After 34 years of loving her, supporting her dreams, and being the best father I could be. After helping her through college, celebrating her wedding, and being a devoted grandfather to her children. Sarah saw me as nothing more than a potential burden she wanted to avoid. "I see," I said calmly, not trusting myself to say more in that moment. The grandchildren were still playing nearby, and I didn't want them to witness any conflict between the adults. "Thank you for being honest about how you feel." I stood up from their couch and walked toward the front door without making a scene or getting into an argument. "Dad, don't be dramatic about this," Sarah called after me as I headed for the exit. "We're just being practical about family finances and planning." She didn't even seem to understand how deeply her words had hurt me. This doesn't change anything between us as a family. But everything had already changed the moment she called me a burden. That night, I went home and made the decision that would teach Sarah the most expensive lesson of her adult life. After Sarah called me a burden on Father's Day, I drove home feeling completely betrayed by my own daughter. I went straight to my home office where I keep all my important financial documents and property records. I needed to look at exactly what I owned and what Sarah didn't know about my wealth. To remind myself of the empire I had built while she was growing up, taking my success for granted. I pulled out my filing cabinet and found the folder labeled Real Estate Portfolio Current Holdings. Inside were property deeds, investment records, and financial statements showing my complete net worth. $15.8 million in assets that my daughter thought made me a burden. I spread all the documents across my desk and started reading through them carefully. The numbers told a story that made Sarah's Father's Day insult even more ridiculous and insulting to someone who had achieved so much financial success. The first stack of papers showed my commercial real estate holdings throughout California. 3 shopping centers in growing suburban areas worth a combined $4.2 million. 2 office complexes that I leased to technology companies worth $3.6 million. 1 industrial warehouse facility that generates $50,000 in monthly rental income. These commercial properties alone were worth $8.4 million and provided me with steady passive income. But my residential real estate investments were even more valuable and impressive. I owned 12 luxury homes in exclusive neighborhoods that I had built and sold over the years. Currently, I kept 4 of the most beautiful properties as rental investments for wealthy professionals and executives. These 4 houses were worth a combined $3.7 million and rented for $8,000 to $12,000 per month each. I also found my records for undeveloped land holdings that I was saving for future development projects. 47 acres on the north side of town that I bought for $600,000 5 years ago. The land was now worth $2.1 million as the city expanded in that direction. Another 23 acres near the new highway interchange worth $1.4 million. These land investments totaled $3.5 million in current market value. My construction company assets were documented in the next folder I reviewed. Heavy equipment, tools, and vehicles worth $400,000. Contracts for 3 luxury homes currently under construction worth $2.3 million in total project value. My company's reputation and client relationships represented additional business value that wasn't even included in my net worth calculations. Then I pulled out the most important document of all, the property deed for Sarah's house. The $2.3 million home that she and Kevin thought they owned, but was actually registered to Thompson Holdings, LLC. My investment company was the legal owner of their dream house, and they were essentially my tenants paying rent disguised as mortgage payments. Sarah had called me a burden while living in a house that I owned completely. I calculated the monthly cash flow from all my rental properties and investments. Commercial real estate income, $47,000 monthly. Residential rental income, $38,000 monthly. Land lease agreements, $12,000 monthly. My total passive income was $97,000 every month without working or managing day-to-day business operations. But I also looked at my liquid assets and investment accounts beyond real estate holdings. Money market accounts, $800,000. Stock portfolio, $1.2 million. Retirement accounts, $900,000. Business checking accounts, $400,000. I had $3.3 million in cash and securities that I could access quickly if needed. My total net worth calculation showed the complete scope of my financial success over 35 years. Real estate holdings, $15.8 million. Liquid investments, $3.3 million. Business assets, $400,000. Grand total net worth, $19.5 million. I was worth almost $20 million while my daughter worried about me becoming a financial burden. The irony of Sarah's concern about supporting me was almost laughable when I looked at these numbers. I made more money in passive income every month than most people made working full-time jobs all year. My monthly income was nearly $100,000, while Sarah and Kevin together made about $12,000 monthly from their jobs. I was financially supporting their lifestyle without them knowing it. I also calculated what I had spent supporting Sarah over the years compared to my total wealth. College education, wedding expenses, various financial help, and housing subsidies totaled about $400,000. That represented just 2% of my current net worth. Supporting Sarah had been financially insignificant to someone with my level of wealth and income generation. Looking at my property tax statements reminded me of another advantage I had over Sarah and Kevin. Property taxes on their house were $18,000 annually, but they thought it was included in their mortgage payment. Really, I was paying those taxes directly as the actual property owner. They had no idea about this additional expense that would shock them if they ever had to pay it themselves. The maintenance and insurance costs for their house were also my responsibility as the real owner. New roof repairs, $22,000. HVAC system replacement, $15,000. Landscaping and pool maintenance, $8,000 annually. I had been covering all these major expenses while they took credit for living in such a beautiful, well-maintained home. As I sat there looking at all these financial records, I felt a mixture of hurt and anger about Sarah's treatment of me. But I also felt something else that surprised me. I felt powerful in a way I had never experienced before. Sarah had no idea that her comfortable lifestyle depended entirely on my wealth and generosity. The daughter who called me a burden was actually the burden on my financial resources. Tomorrow, Sarah was going to learn exactly who controlled her housing situation and comfortable lifestyle. The next morning, I woke up with a clear plan about what I needed to do to Sarah. She thought she could call me a burden while living in a house I owned and enjoying a lifestyle I made possible. Sarah had no idea that her comfortable life existed only because of my wealth and generosity every month. It was time for my daughter to learn a very expensive lesson about respect and consequences. This wasn't just about being angry or getting revenge for hurt feelings. This was about teaching Sarah that actions have real costs she couldn't ignore. I spent the morning organizing my strategy for maximum impact on her understanding of our real relationship. This wasn't going to be some emotional outburst or angry phone call that Sarah could dismiss as her father being dramatic. This was going to be a calculated financial lesson that would shock her into realizing her mistakes. If Sarah thought I was a burden, then she didn't need the benefits of my wealth supporting her lifestyle. I was going to withdraw my financial support completely and let her experience her actual economic situation. I decided to start with the biggest shock first to get Sarah's immediate attention. The house she thought she owned was actually my property, and I could sell it whenever I wanted. Today was Monday, which meant I had the whole week to arrange the sale before Sarah would even know what was happening. I called my real estate agent and told him I wanted to list the Maple Street property for immediate sale at full market value. "Marcus, that's a beautiful house," my agent said when I gave him the address. "We should be able to get $2.5 million for that property in today's market." I told him to list it for $2.4 million for a quick sale within 30 days. "Price it to move fast," I explained. "I want multiple offers and a closing within 6 weeks maximum." My agent agreed to have the listing active by Thursday morning with professional photos and marketing materials. But I didn't want to stop with just selling Sarah's house. I wanted her to understand the full scope of my control over her comfortable lifestyle. I looked through my records to identify every way I had been secretly supporting their family without them knowing it. Kevin's company, where I was a major investor and had influenced his promotion. Sarah's business, where my real estate companies were significant clients providing steady income. The financial connections that made their success possible. I also planned to reveal my complete real estate empire to Sarah, so she would understand who she had called a burden. $19.5 million in net worth that she knew nothing about. Commercial properties, luxury homes, undeveloped land, and a successful construction business that generated massive monthly income. Sarah would learn that her father was actually one of the wealthiest men in their city. My plan was to let Sarah discover the house sale through a "for sale" sign in her front yard, rather than warning her ahead of time. I wanted her to feel confused and panicked before she understood what was happening. Only then would I explain that the father she considered a burden was actually the owner of everything she took for granted. The shock of seeing her house listed for sale would force her to confront the reality of our relationship. The timing of this lesson would be perfect because of their financial situation. Without my secret support, Sarah and Kevin would have to find almost $4,000 monthly for actual market rate housing. Their combined income could barely afford a small apartment, let alone the luxury lifestyle they had been enjoying. They would suddenly understand the difference between their actual earning power and the life I had been funding. I calculated the immediate financial impact this would have on Sarah's monthly budget. Without my subsidized housing, positive $4,000 needed monthly. Without my business connections, negative 30% of their current income. Without emergency financial support, vulnerability to any unexpected expenses. Sarah would need to find ways to replace about $6,000 monthly that she had been taking for granted. I also thought about the long-term consequences of my decision to stop supporting Sarah financially. Without my help, she and Kevin would have to dramatically downsize their lifestyle and expectations. They might need to move to a cheaper neighborhood and take the kids out of their expensive private school. Sarah would finally understand the difference between her perceived success and her actual economic reality. The most important part of my plan was to stay calm and controlled when Sarah inevitably called me in panic about her house being sold. I wasn't going to yell or lecture her about calling me a burden. I was going to let the financial consequences speak for themselves about who really controlled her comfortable life. When Sarah asked why I was selling her house, I would simply remind her that she said I was a burden she couldn't handle. I spent the afternoon preparing all the documentation I would need to prove my ownership and control. Property deeds showing my company as the legal owner of their house. Financial records proving my net worth and investment portfolio. Business documents showing my connections to Kevin's job and Sarah's clients. Evidence that would make it impossible for Sarah to deny the truth about her dependence on my wealth. That evening, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. I felt like I had control over my own money and relationships again. For 3 years, I had been secretly subsidizing Sarah's lifestyle while getting nothing but complaints about being a burden to her family. Now I was taking back my power and letting Sarah experience the consequences of her disrespectful attitude toward the person who made her dreams possible. Tomorrow, my real estate agent would start marketing Sarah's house to potential buyers. By Thursday, there would be a for sale sign in her front yard that would shock her into understanding who really owned her comfortable life. 4 days after I contacted my real estate agent, Sarah discovered the for sale sign in her front yard. It was Thursday morning around 8:30 when my phone started ringing frantically. Sarah's name appeared on my screen, and I could already imagine the panic and confusion in her voice. I let it ring 3 times before answering calmly like nothing unusual was happening. "Good morning, Sarah," I said in a normal tone. "How are you doing today?" "Dad, there's a for sale sign in our front yard!" Sarah screamed into the phone. "Someone put up a real estate sign on our property without asking us." I could hear the stress and confusion in her voice as she tried to understand what was happening. "The sign says our house is listed for $2.4 million. Sarah was clearly panicked about someone trying to sell the house she thought she owned. I stayed completely calm as I listened to Sarah's crisis about her housing situation. "That sounds very strange, Sarah," I replied matter-of-factly. "Have you called the real estate company to ask about the sign?" I wanted Sarah to discover the truth slowly instead of just telling her what I had done. "Maybe there's some explanation for why your house is being marketed for sale." I was enjoying watching Sarah slowly realize that something was very wrong with her ownership situation. "Dad, I called the real estate office and they said the property owner contacted them to list the house," Sarah said desperately. "But Kevin and I are the owners. We've been making mortgage payments for 3 years." I could hear her typing on her computer as she looked at her financial records online. This has to be some kind of mistake or fraud that we need to report to the police immediately. That does sound confusing, Sarah, I said calmly. Have you checked your property deed to confirm your legal ownership? I was letting Sarah discover her situation slowly instead of shocking her all at once. Maybe you should look at your official paperwork to see what it says about the house title. I wanted her to feel the full impact of confusion and panic before I revealed my role in her housing crisis. Sarah was quiet for a moment as she searched through their important documents at home. Dad, I can't find our property deed anywhere in our files, she said nervously. Kevin handles most of our paperwork, but he's already left for work this morning. I could tell Sarah was starting to worry that something was seriously wrong with their home ownership. I'm going to call our mortgage company to ask about this situation. 20 minutes later, Sarah called me back even more frantic and confused than before. Dad, our mortgage company says we don't have a mortgage with them, she said in complete panic. They have no record of us ever applying for a loan on this house. Sarah was discovering that her entire understanding of their financial situation was completely wrong. How is that possible? We've been making payments every month for 3 years. This was the moment I had been waiting for since listing her house for sale 4 days ago. Sarah, you don't have a mortgage because you don't own that house, I told her directly. The property is owned by Thompson Holdings, LLC, which is one of my investment companies. There was complete silence on the phone as Sarah absorbed this shocking information about her housing situation. You've been living in a house that I own while thinking you were building equity through monthly payments. What do you mean you own our house? Sarah whispered as the full truth started to hit her. Dad, this is our home where we're raising your grandchildren. I could hear her breathing heavily as she realized that her housing security was completely dependent on someone she had called a burden. We put all our savings into what we thought was our down payment. Sarah, you never made a down payment, I explained calmly. I bought the house directly from the seller 3 years ago when your mortgage application was rejected. I wanted Sarah to understand how completely she had been dependent on my financial support without knowing it. Your monthly payments to me were just covering property taxes and maintenance costs, not building any ownership equity. I could hear Kevin yelling in the background as Sarah explained the situation to him over the phone. What do you mean your father owns our house? He screamed. How is that even possible without us knowing about it? Kevin was just as shocked as Sarah to learn that their comfortable home belonged to someone else entirely. Sarah, if he owns the house, then we're just renters who can be evicted at any time. Dad, please don't sell our house, Sarah begged desperately through her tears. Where are we supposed to live with the children if you kick us out? The panic in her voice was obvious as she understood that her housing security could disappear at any moment. We can't afford to buy anything else in this neighborhood or school district. Sarah was finally understanding that her comfortable lifestyle was built on a foundation that could vanish instantly. Sarah, you called me a burden that you couldn't handle, I reminded her calmly. So I decided to stop being a burden on your family by removing myself from your housing situation. I wanted her to understand the direct connection between her Father's Day insult and her current housing crisis. If you don't want me in your life, then you don't need my property supporting your lifestyle either. But Dad, I didn't know you owned everything, Sarah protested through her sobs. If I had known, I never would have said those horrible things to you. This admission proved exactly what I had suspected about Sarah's motivations and character. Please give me a chance to make this right with you. Sarah was only apologizing now because she understood what she was losing financially, not because she genuinely valued our relationship. "Sarah, tomorrow I'm coming over to show you exactly what you've lost by calling me a burden," I told her firmly. "We're going to sit down and go through my complete financial portfolio so you understand who you rejected." I wanted Sarah to see the full picture of my wealth and success that she had dismissed so carelessly. "Then you can decide if your Father's Day insults were worth losing your father's support forever." The daughter who thought I was a burden was about to learn the most expensive lesson of her adult life. After telling Sarah I was coming over to show her the complete truth about my wealth and power, I spent the entire day gathering 35 years of financial documentation. I needed comprehensive proof of every property I owned and every dollar of net worth that Sarah didn't know about. My daughter thought calling me a burden was just about hurt feelings, but I was about to show her the most successful real estate empire in our city. I wanted complete documentation that would shock Sarah into understanding exactly who she had insulted on Father's Day. I started by pulling out every property deed and title document from my filing cabinets. Commercial real estate holdings throughout California that generated massive monthly income. Luxury residential properties in the most exclusive neighborhoods in town. Undeveloped land parcels that would be worth millions more as the city continued expanding. Each document proved another piece of wealth that Sarah had no idea existed in her father's portfolio. The first category I organized was my commercial real estate empire that formed the foundation of my wealth. Westside Shopping Center, purchased for $1.2 million, now worth $2.8 million. Downtown Office Complex, purchased for $800,000, now worth $2.1 million. Industrial Warehouse District, purchased for $600,000, now worth $1.5 million. These three properties alone were worth $7.4 million and generated $63,000 monthly in rental income. Next, I pulled out the deeds for my luxury residential investment properties that I had built and kept as rentals. Oakwood Estates luxury home, built for $400,000, now worth $1.3 million, rents for $9,000 monthly. Hillcrest Manor custom home, built for $500,000, now worth $1.6 million, rents for $12,000 monthly. Riverside Villa executive home, built for $300,000, now worth $1.1 million, rents for $8,000 monthly. These rental houses provided $29,000 monthly in passive income. I also gathered the documentation for my undeveloped land holdings that represented future wealth as the city grew. North Valley Acreage, 47 acres purchased for $600,000. Current value $2.1 million. Highway Interchange Property, 23 acres purchased for $400,000. Current value $1.4 million. Suburban Expansion Lots, 15 acres purchased for $200,000. Current value $900,000. My land investments totaled $4.4 million in current market value. The construction company records showed another dimension of my business success beyond just property ownership. Thompson Construction, LLC. Assets worth $400,000 in equipment and vehicles. Current contracts. 3 luxury homes under construction worth $2.3 million total project value. Client relationships and reputation, worth additional millions in future business opportunities that couldn't be calculated precisely, but represented ongoing income potential for years ahead. Then I organized the most shocking documents of all, the proof that I owned everything Sarah thought belonged to her family. Property deed for their house, owned by Thompson Holdings LLC, my investment company, purchased for $2.3 million. Mortgage records. No mortgage exists because I bought the property with cash directly. Property tax records, paid annually by my company, not included in Sarah's monthly payments to me. This single document would destroy Sarah's entire understanding of her housing situation. I also gathered evidence of my connections to Sarah and Kevin's professional success that they didn't know about. Investment records showing my ownership stake in Kevin's company, where I influenced his promotion and salary increases. Client contracts showing my real estate companies as major customers of Sarah's small business, providing 30% of her annual revenue. Professional references and networking connections that had advanced both their careers through my behind-the-scenes influence. My liquid assets and investment accounts represented additional wealth beyond real estate holdings. Bank statements showing $800,000 in money market accounts. Brokerage statements showing $1.2 million in stock portfolios. Retirement account balances totaling $900,000. Business checking accounts with $400,000 available for immediate use. My liquid net worth was $3.3 million that I could access quickly if needed. I spread all these documents across my dining room table and calculated my complete financial picture. Commercial real estate, $7.4 million. Residential rentals, $4.1 million. Undeveloped land, $4.4 million. Construction business, $400,000. Liquid investments, $3.3 million. Total net worth, $19.6 million. I was worth almost $20 million while my daughter worried about me becoming a burden. The monthly income from all my investments was equally impressive and shocking. Commercial rental income, $63,000 monthly. Residential rental income, $29,000 monthly. Construction project profits, $15,000 average monthly. Investment account dividends, $8,000 monthly. My total monthly passive income was $115,000 without working or managing day-to-day operations. I also calculated what I had been spending to subsidize Sarah's lifestyle compared to my actual wealth and income. Housing subsidy through below-market rent, $2,000 monthly. Professional connections and business referrals, worth approximately $1,000 monthly in additional income they received. Emergency financial help over the years, average $500 monthly. My total support represented less than 4% of my monthly income. Looking at Sarah's actual financial situation without my support was revealing and educational. Kevin's salary, $4,800 monthly. Sarah's business income, $3,200 monthly. Their combined income, $8,000 monthly. Market rate housing in their neighborhood, $6,000 monthly minimum. They literally could not afford to live in their current area without my financial support making it possible. The documentation also showed how much I had personally sacrificed to help Sarah over the years while building my wealth. Living modestly despite my success so she wouldn't feel entitled to my money. Working longer hours to build the business that would provide her security. Investing carefully to create generational wealth that would benefit my grandchildren's future. All of this sacrifice for someone who called me a burden. Tomorrow, Sarah was going to see every property deed, every financial statement, and every piece of evidence that proved her father was one of the most successful businessmen in their city. The next afternoon, I drove to Sarah's house with 2 briefcases full of 35 years of financial documentation. I had organized everything into clear categories that would show the complete scope of my real estate empire and wealth, This wasn't going to be an emotional conversation or a shouting match about hurt feelings. This was going to be a business presentation that would shock Sarah and Kevin into understanding their real financial situation. I wanted them to see exactly what they had lost by calling me a burden on Father's Day. I knocked on their front door at exactly 2 o'clock, like I had scheduled the day before. Sarah answered, looking nervous and worried about what I was going to reveal to them. "Hi, Dad," she said quietly. "Thanks for coming over to explain everything about the house." Kevin was standing behind her, looking uncomfortable and anxious about this confrontation with his father-in-law. "Come in and we can sit at the kitchen table," Sarah said, leading me inside the house that I actually owned. I set both briefcases on their kitchen table and opened them to reveal stacks of organized financial documents. "Sarah, I want you and Kevin to understand exactly who you called a burden last Sunday," I said calmly. "These papers document every property I own and every dollar of wealth I've built over 35 years. Kevin looked shocked by the amount of paperwork I had brought to prove my financial success and real estate holdings. I pulled out the first stack of documents showing my commercial real estate empire throughout California. "Let's start with my business properties," I said, handing them the deeds and financial statements. "Shopping centers, office buildings, and industrial warehouses that generate income every month." Sarah was reading through the property records with growing amazement at the values and rental income amounts. "My commercial real estate portfolio is worth $7.4 million. Kevin was looking over Sarah's shoulder at the financial records with complete disbelief about my wealth. "Marcus, you own all these commercial properties?" he asked in shock. "You never told us you were involved in major real estate development projects." Sarah was realizing that her father's business success was far beyond anything she had imagined. "Dad, I thought you just built a few houses and sold them," she said quietly. I handed them the next category showing my luxury residential rental properties that I had built over the years. Custom homes in exclusive neighborhoods that I rent to wealthy executives and professionals, I explained methodically. Each house generates $8,000 to $12,000 monthly in rental income. Sarah was shaking her head in disbelief at how much money my residential properties were making every month. "These 4 rental houses are worth $4.1 million. Next came my undeveloped land holdings that represented future wealth as the city continued expanding. Acreage and lots that I bought years ago when they were cheap farmland," I continued. "Now they're worth millions as the city grows around them." Kevin was calculating the land values on his phone and looking stunned at the appreciation over time. "My land investments are worth $4.4 million in today's market." Then I pulled out the most shocking documentation of all, the proof that I owned the house they were sitting in. "Property deed for this house showing Thompson Holdings LLC as the legal owner," I said, placing the document directly in front of them. "Purchase price, $2.3 million, paid in cash 3 years ago." Sarah started crying as she saw the legal proof that her dream home belonged to someone else entirely. "Dad, why didn't you tell us you owned our house?" Sarah asked through her tears. "We thought we were building equity and investing in our future." I looked directly at both of them as I explained my reasoning. "Because I wanted you to feel independent and successful, instead of knowing you were living off my charity." Kevin was staring at the property deed like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. I also showed them the evidence of my connections to their professional success that they didn't know about. Investment records showing my ownership in Kevin's company, where I recommended him for promotion, I continued. Client contracts showing my businesses as Sarah's biggest customers, providing 30% of her income. They were both realizing that even their career success had been influenced by my wealth and connections. Finally, I pulled out my complete financial portfolio and started calculating my total net worth in front of them. Commercial properties, $7.4 million. Residential rentals, $4.1 million. Land holdings, $4.4 million. Construction business, $400,000. Liquid investments, $3.3 million. Sarah and Kevin were watching me add up the numbers with growing horror at the total. My complete net worth, I announced calmly, is $19.6 million. The room was completely silent as they processed this shocking revelation about my wealth. Plus, monthly passive income of $115,000 from rental properties and investments. Sarah was sobbing as she understood the magnitude of success that she had dismissed as a burden. "Dad, I had no idea you were worth almost $20 million, Sarah whispered in complete shock. "You live so modestly and never showed off your wealth to anyone." She was finally understanding that her father was one of the most successful businessmen in their entire city. "How did we not know about your real estate empire all these years?" "Because I wanted you to develop your own work ethic and values," I replied. "I didn't want you growing up entitled or expecting everything to be handed to you." I looked directly at both of them as I continued. "But I never expected that my generosity would be repaid by being called a burden to your family." Kevin was overwhelmed by the scope of wealth he had never known existed in his father-in-law. "Marcus, we had no idea you were supporting our entire lifestyle," he said. "We thought we were managing our finances independently and successfully." Sarah was staring at all the financial documents spread across the table like she couldn't process the reality of our relationship. "Without my support, you could never afford this house, this neighborhood, or your comfortable lifestyle," I told them both. "Your independence was actually complete dependence on someone you decided was a burden." The daughter who had rejected me was finally ready to learn about respect and consequences for treating family badly. After showing Sarah and Kevin the complete truth about my $19.6 million net worth, they both collapsed in complete emotional breakdown. Sarah was crying harder than I had seen since her mother's funeral 8 years ago. "Dad, I'm so sorry," she sobbed repeatedly. "I made the biggest mistake of my life by calling you a burden." Kevin was also visibly shaken as he understood how badly they had misjudged me and my importance to their family's success and security. Sarah grabbed my hands desperately across their kitchen table that I was paying for. "Dad, please forgive me for being so stupid and ungrateful," she begged through her tears. "I had no idea you were the person behind everything good in our lives." Kevin nodded in agreement while looking ashamed of their treatment of me. "Marcus, we thought you were just a regular retiree who might need financial help someday," he said. "We never understood that you were basically funding our entire comfortable lifestyle." I listened to their apologies without showing much emotion on my face. After being called a burden and treated like I was disposable, words alone weren't enough anymore. "Sarah, why did you decide I was a burden?" I asked directly. "What happened that made you want to exclude your father from your family's future?" I wanted her to explain her decision, now that she understood what she had actually rejected on Father's Day. Sarah looked embarrassed and ashamed as she tried to explain her insulting words about me. "Dad, Kevin and I were worried about our monthly budget and long-term financial security," she said quietly. "We were scared about having enough money for the kids' college and our retirement savings." Kevin was nodding as she tried to justify their selfish attitude toward family responsibilities. We thought adding your potential care costs would ruin our financial planning. So you chose to protect your money instead of trusting your own father, I said calmly. After 34 years of love and support, you saw me as a financial threat. Sarah was crying as she realized how insulting and hurtful her assumptions had been to someone who had sacrificed so much for her happiness. You thought rejecting me was easier than having an honest conversation about family responsibilities. Kevin tried to take some responsibility for their terrible decision about treating me like a burden. Marcus, I was the one who brought up concerns about elderly care costs and family financial obligations, he admitted. I let fear about money influence how we treated you as Sarah's father. But then he added something that made me even angrier than Sarah's original insult. If we had known about your wealth, we never would have worried about supporting you. Kevin, that's exactly the problem with your apology, I replied firmly. You only feel bad now because you know about my money. I wanted both of them to understand how shallow their regret really was about hurting me. Your respect for me shouldn't depend on my bank account balance or real estate portfolio. Sarah was nodding in agreement as she understood the deeper issue with their relationship values. Dad, you're absolutely right, Sarah said through her tears. I should have respected you as my father regardless of money or financial concerns. She was finally understanding that family relationships should be based on love and appreciation, not financial calculations. I treated you like you were disposable instead of the most important person in my life. Kevin was also realizing how their priorities had been completely wrong about family values. I stood up from their kitchen table and walked to the window overlooking the backyard that I was paying to maintain. Sarah, if I were to consider maintaining any relationship with you, there would be strict conditions, I said without turning around. Non-negotiable requirements that you would have to follow permanently going forward. Sarah immediately agreed to whatever I wanted. Anything, Dad. I'll do whatever it takes to earn back your trust and support. I turned around and looked at both of them seriously about the future of our family relationship. First, you will apologize to me publicly in front of our entire extended family, I said firmly. I want everyone to understand exactly what you did and why calling me a burden was wrong. Sarah nodded eagerly through her tears. You will acknowledge that you rejected the person who made your comfortable lifestyle possible. Second, you will treat me with the dignity and respect I deserve as your father and grandfather, I continued. No more making family decisions without including me properly in the conversation. I wanted them to understand that I expected to be valued as an important family member going forward. From now on, I am automatically welcome at every family gathering and celebration. Both of them promised to always include me in their lives properly. Third, you will pay me market rate rent for this house if you want to continue living here, I announced. $6,000 monthly, which is what comparable properties cost in this neighborhood. Sarah looked shocked by this financial requirement, but understood it was fair. This will help you remember that comfortable living has real costs that someone has to pay. The most important condition is this, I continued seriously. If you ever disrespect me or treat me like a burden again, our relationship ends permanently. I wanted them to understand that this was their last chance with me as a father. There will be no more financial support, and I won't be part of your lives or my grandchildren's lives. Sarah was crying as she understood the stakes of our future relationship. Dad, I promise I'll never hurt you like this again, Sarah said desperately. You're the most important person in our family, and I almost lost you forever. Kevin added. Marcus, we realize now that we don't deserve your generosity, but we're grateful for another chance to prove ourselves. They were both begging me to give them an opportunity to earn back my trust and respect. I gathered up my financial documents and put them back in my briefcases. Sarah, I'm not going to cancel the house sale immediately, I told her calmly. You need to prove that you value our relationship for the right reasons first. Sarah looked disappointed, but understanding about earning back my support slowly. But if you meet my conditions over the next 6 months, I'll consider taking the house off the market. Thank you, Dad, Sarah whispered. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'll spend the rest of my life proving that family means more to me than money. For the first time in years, I felt hopeful about our relationship. Sarah had finally learned that I deserved respect and proper treatment. But more importantly, she understood that my love came with expectations and real consequences for bad behavior. 6 months have passed since I revealed my $19.6 million real estate empire to Sarah and set clear boundaries for our relationship. I'm here today to tell you exactly what happened after that emotional family meeting at their kitchen table. Sarah and Kevin kept every single promise they made to me that day. They started treating me with genuine respect instead of seeing me as a potential burden on their finances. No more worrying about me becoming a financial problem or making family decisions without including me properly. Sarah calls me 3 times a week now just to talk and check on how I'm doing since her mother died. These conversations aren't about money or financial concerns that I might create for their family. They're genuine father-daughter talks about life, business, and raising my grandchildren in a loving family environment. Dad, I realize now that I was treating you like a liability instead of my father, she told me recently. I'm ashamed that it took almost losing you to understand how much you mean to me. Kevin also made dramatic changes in how he treats me and includes me in their family decisions. He apologized privately for his role in making me feel unwelcome and promised to always defend our relationship. Marcus, I was wrong to worry about money instead of appreciating everything you've done for our family, he said sincerely. From now on, you're always welcome in our home and our lives. Kevin now asks for my business advice and includes me in their important family planning discussions. 3 months after our family meeting, Sarah made the public apology I had required from her. She called a gathering with our entire extended family and explained exactly what had happened during our Father's Day conversation. I made a terrible mistake by calling my father a burden, Sarah announced to everyone with tears in her eyes. Really, he's the person who made our comfortable lifestyle possible for years, without us even knowing it. I let fear about money influence how I treated the most generous person in our family, she continued during her public apology. Dad has been incredibly successful in real estate, and I was too selfish to appreciate his sacrifices for our happiness. Our entire family was shocked to learn about my wealth and Sarah's ungrateful treatment of someone who had done so much for her success. Sarah and Kevin have also been paying me the market rate rent I required for continuing to live in my house, $6,000 monthly, which represents what they should have been paying all along for their luxury lifestyle. They're learning to budget properly and live within their actual means instead of depending on my subsidies. Every month when I write this rent check, I remember how lucky we are to have you in our lives, Sarah says. My relationship with my grandchildren has improved dramatically since establishing these clear boundaries with their parents. I spend time with them every weekend now, and they're learning about respect and family values from their grandfather. Grandpa, Mommy says you own lots of houses and buildings, my 7-year-old grandson told me recently. Thank you for letting us live in one of your nice houses. These conversations with my grandchildren mean everything to me. I decided to take their house off the market after Sarah proved that she genuinely valued our relationship over money. She had been consistently respectful, included me in family decisions, and treated me like the important family member I deserved to be. Dad, thank you for giving me a second chance to be the daughter you raised me to be, she said when I canceled the house sale. I'll never take your love and support for granted again. Sarah and Kevin have also learned to manage their finances more responsibly since understanding the real cost of their lifestyle. They created a proper budget that accounts for their actual housing costs and living expenses. They stopped making purchases they couldn't afford and started saving money for emergencies instead of depending on me to solve their financial problems. These changes have made them more mature and responsible adults. I've also changed how I handle my wealth and family relationships going forward. No more secret support or hidden generosity that people can take for granted without appreciation. If I help family members, they know exactly what I'm doing and why I'm choosing to be generous with my resources, and they understand that my financial help comes with expectations of respectful treatment and genuine gratitude. I'm happy to share my success with family members who value our relationship, I tell them clearly. But my money and properties aren't available to people who see me as a burden to their lives. This boundary has actually improved all my family relationships, because people understand that respect and love must be mutual to continue over time. My real estate portfolio has continued growing and generating excellent returns on my investments. The properties I didn't sell are now worth over $21 million as the market has appreciated. I'm more financially secure than ever and able to enjoy my retirement while still building wealth for my grandchildren's future. But I'm also more selective about who benefits from my success and generosity. Looking back on this experience, I learned crucial lessons about family relationships and financial boundaries that every person should understand. First, generosity without appreciation creates entitlement instead of gratitude in family members. By secretly funding Sarah's lifestyle, I allowed her to take my sacrifice for granted and see me as expendable. She needed to understand the source and cost of her comfort to appreciate it properly. Second, setting clear financial boundaries actually strengthens family relationships instead of damaging them like people might expect. Sarah respects me more now because she learned what losing me would cost her family. She values our relationship because she understands it's not guaranteed or automatic just because we're related. Our bond is stronger now because it's based on mutual respect instead of one-sided giving. Most importantly, I learned that standing up for yourself doesn't destroy family bonds when done with wisdom and clear consequences. It creates healthier relationships based on respect and genuine appreciation for each other. Sarah thought she could treat me like a burden while keeping the benefits of my love and financial support. Instead, she learned that family relationships require reciprocal consideration and gratitude to thrive over time. Today, I have the loving family relationship I always deserved, but was afraid to demand for myself. Sarah treats me like a valued father instead of a potential financial liability. Kevin includes me in their lives because he respects my contributions to their family's success and security. My grandchildren get to learn from their grandfather, who taught their parents about boundaries, respect, and the real meaning of family love. At 62 years old, I finally have the dignity and appreciation I worked my entire adult life to achieve. The daughter who thought I was disposable discovered I was irreplaceable to her family's happiness and success. Setting clear property boundaries saved our family relationship instead of destroying it. If I hadn't been willing to lose the relationship, I never would have been able to improve it into something genuine and lasting. If you are still here and enjoyed this story, please like this video. It really helps me know you want more content like this. If this story gave you some value or made you think, please share it with your friends or someone who needs to hear this message. If you have any questions or suggestions about this story, please type them in the comments below. I love reading what you think. If you want more stories like this one, please subscribe to this channel. There are many more stories coming. Remember, setting boundaries is the first step to respect and peace in your family relationships.